What's going on, people in internet land? Kimchi Chris here, and welcome to today's brand new episode of Rock Bliss with Kimchi Chris. And it's that time of year again. It's time to argue about an institution that we claim we don't care about, but we also can't stop talking about. And you're not stupid, you clicked on the title, you know what we are talking about here. We're talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they just announced their list of inductees for 2021, and every boomer around the world is either really happy or really angry right now. But I think most logical music fans know that at this point, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is what it is. It's a tourist trap. It's probably a pretty cool one to visit. Most people I know that have visited the actual museum seem to have a good time, but as far as the list of honorable musicians to get inducted into this little camp in this little museum, it doesn't really seem like it makes a whole lot of sense. A lot of bands that deserve to be in there take forever to get in, yet some get in their first year. Some of them are just completely forgotten about, and many of them are ignored. But regardless of what you think of the institution, they are good at getting people talking. That's right, they're good at getting people discussing the facts and making news articles about them. So whoever does their PR, good on you, good on you. And who knows, at this point they might just be trying to make people mad so that they do get talked about, because they know if they were doing everything right, people wouldn't really care anymore. So it seems like it's good business to ignore some of these bigger acts that have huge fan bases and spawned entire genres of music, so that you can induct some people that, you know, were talented in some way, shape, or form, but maybe didn't really have as much of an impact as that. But regardless of how we feel about the bands that did not make the cut this year, we're here to talk about the bands that did make the cut. And it really does seem like the Hall of Fame, since they've brought two subcategories back, realize that they really do need to, I don't know, rebrand or revitalize the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame experience. Because let's be real, last year happened and a lot of people, myself included, didn't even know there was an induction ceremony. So on top of the normal inductees this year, they have two categories, one of them called Early Influence Award, as well as Musical Excellence. So there's a total of 12 artists being inducted this year. That's a lot of bands, that's a lot of singers, that's a lot of songwriters. So let's just dive into who actually made the cut. First and foremost, Tina Turner. It's a surprise she wasn't there already, so it's very much well-deserved for her to be in there. Technically, it's her second induction from the Tina and Ike situation up to her now being in there as a solo artist, but I gotta be honest, I've always known her more as a solo artist. Do I care about her music? Not so much, but her influence is undeniable, and the fact that she wasn't there just, I don't know, it seemed pretty stupid. So her being in there, it makes all the sense in the world. I'm glad for her that she's there, and I'm glad for her fan base. Next up, we have Carole King. I don't know anything about her. I'm sure somebody watching is mad that I'm saying I know nothing about her, but I really don't. So, good for her, I guess. Good for her fan base. She seems like she might have a fan base that cares about this kind of crap, so good for Carole King and her fan base. But next up, we have the Go-Go's. Yeah, they deserve to be in there. And what's crazy about this is we have 3 female artists in a row here, which, you know, there's been controversy in the past that they kind of snub females as much as they do certain genres of music and certain acts and things like that. So it's wonderful to see that in there, and the Go-Go's deserve it. They deserve it. They were trailblazing. I think they get ignored, and they really did influence a lot. I mean, they were a really big deal in that regard. Sure, there were bands before them that did some similar things, but they did write all of their own music, which was a big deal. And yeah, they deserve to be in there. I think it's wonderful that they're there, and good on them. I'm very excited for them and their fan base that they are finally getting a little bit of respect from this tourist trap. That sounded so sarcastic. I didn't mean it that way, but the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is silly. But, you know, it also is probably a really fun thing when you're actually getting inducted. So I really do mean that. Great for the Go-Go's. And next up, we have our one hip-hop artist that's inducted every year, and that's Jay-Z. Now, this is a weird one. This is a weird one because I think he deserves to be there as much as any other hip-hop artist. However, I feel there's a lot of hip-hop artists that should probably be in there before him. And of course there's the controversy of, should hip-hop be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I don't know. It's one of those things. It kind of gets down to the specific artist. In the case of like something like Run DMC or Public Enemy, I don't think many people could argue that, but Jay-Z is definitely more in the vein of just being traditional hip-hop for the time period that he was out. And you know, I knew he'd get inducted at some point. I didn't know that it'd be this year, with it being the first year he could possibly get in. Good for Jay-Z. It's nice to see an artist in there that's still relevant and putting out music that, you know, people care a little bit more about. But with that being said, moving on to the next one, we have the Foo Fighters. Now that's a band that I will say they're just as relevant as they ever have been, if not more so now, but I knew they were going to get in. I knew they were going to get in on their first year, that they were, you know, eligible to get in or whatever. I knew they were going to get in there. I just don't like the Foo Fighters. I don't like the Foo Fighters. Actually, I take that back. I don't hate the Foo Fighters. I just find their music so middle of the road. It's inoffensive, but it also doesn't do anything for me. It's like a Kroger or Walmart, or actually more so like Target, because Kroger and Walmart make me mad and I don't like them. But when I go to Target, it's just a middle of the road experience. It's not particularly good. It's not particularly bad. I go in, I get my stuff, and I leave. And I guess if that's what you want from your music, you want to press play on the Spotify app on your phone and hear some rock music that won't really offend you, and you can play it around your parents, maybe even your grandparents, and it's gonna be fine. The Foo Fighters are good for that. So there you have it. There you have it with them. I knew they'd get in. It's not really a shock. Dave Grohl is kind of like their poster child, so who knows? Maybe one day Probot and Queens of the Stone Age will actually get in there, since, you know, one of them is his little pet project and the other's a band he's helped out with. That would be pretty cool. Maybe Tenacious D could get in there. He did drum for them. So there might be some positives to Dave Grohl being their little man that they love at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And last up on the list, we have Todd Rundgren, an artist that's brought up every year, and every year I say I don't know a huge amount about him, and every year in the comments on these episodes, you guys say I should check him out. So let me know below what's a good record to start with. Seems like he's someone people have wanted him for quite a while, so congrats to him, congrats to his fans, and that finishes the list of the regular inductees this year. But we have two other lists that it's weird. They're almost like passive aggressive in a way, because they're saying that you weren't an amazing performer, but you did something right. And the first one is an early influence award. I guess that's acts that, you know, did what it sounds like. They influenced genres, but maybe they weren't as commercially viable themselves in their time. And on this list, we have Kraftwerk. That makes sense, kind of. In all honesty, I know that a lot of people have wanted them in for a lot of years, and it seems somewhat of a snub not to have them in there as a regular performer, but they really did have a bigger influence on bands like Depeche Mode, Nine Inch Nails, The Cure, the entire goth scene and dance scene in general, but they were never huge in their heyday, and even to this day, they don't play giant venues, at least not in America. Maybe they do in other countries, I could be wrong on that, but they kind of seem to make sense in that category. I'm sure that it feels a little weird to be in that category when you're a band like them, but and then next up in this category, we have Charlie Patton, another artist I don't know a huge amount about, but from doing 3 seconds of research, seems like he was a big influence on a lot of blues musicians as well as early rock and roll, so good for him. And then we finish up this category with Gil Scott-Heron. Heron? I don't know if I'm saying his name right. I apologize to any of his fans. Another one I don't know a lot about from the similar 3 seconds of research. Seems like he was an influence, so good for him. That seems like those are all appropriate artists for that category. And then rounding this list out, we have the Musical Excellence Award, kind of like the Academic Excellence Award. It seems like this is the one they give to people if they were really good musicians, but maybe kind of on the side or backing someone up or something like that. That's what I think of when I hear this, because if it wasn't that, then you would just have Prince win it every year for every category, right? Because he's a really good musician. But first up on the list, you have LL Cool J. Now that's a weird one, because he is a rapper, obviously, and as we talked about, hip-hop's a big part of this, but I've never heard anyone talk about how good of a musician he is, and maybe I'm missing something. I know his MTV Unplugged was like the stuff back in the day. That was the Unplugged if you were into hip-hop and rap, but even with that, a lot of it was because he had backing bands and things like that, right? I don't know that he really belongs in that category. I'm not saying that LL Cool J doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame, because kind of as we said earlier, if they're going to have hip-hop, you might as well have all the classics, and he falls in that category. But I don't know, it's weird, and I also feel it's weird to have him in a less important category, like a side category, when you have Jay-Z in the main one. and you know for a fact LL was an influence on Jay-Z, so it's very, very odd. If you had put LL even in that influencer one, I think it might have made more sense, but there he is. And then you have Billy Preston, a guy that's played in like a million bands. He played with Little Richard, Sam Cooke, the Rolling Stones even, so he seems like that's a good place to put him, you know? He might not be a household name, but, you know, he's one of those guys that definitely had an impact. And then the last one on the list here is one that all of us will be very familiar with, and that is the mighty Randy Rhodes. And if you're talking musical excellence, oh boy, I would say one of the greatest guitarists ever, arguably the greatest guitarist ever. There's some other ones that are right up there in that category. And come to think of it, that might be a good subject for an episode someday. And even though his time was short with Ozzy, and even before that with Quiet Riot and things of that nature, due to his untimely passing, talking about musical excellence, wow. So that's one that I don't think anybody saw coming. And I have seen a lot of people talking about that positively. Haven't seen anybody talking about it negatively, and that, you know, makes perfect sense. But it's very interesting that he's on there, especially considering that Ozzy's not in there as a solo artist. Black Sabbath is in there, but not Ozzy as a solo artist, and that's what Randy Rhodes is primarily known for. You know, they're not putting him in there because of him being in Quiet Riot. You know, let's be real, Quiet Riot's never going to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But that is a cool surprise there, I will say. That's a cool surprise. It'll be interesting to see what they do for his presentation on stage since he has passed. Will they have someone do a tribute? I kind of hope it's not Zakk Wylde, but let's be honest, it's probably going to be Zakk Wylde. And he's going to ruin Goodbye to Romance with a pinch harmonic every 3 seconds in the performance. That would be so stupid, but I can see him doing it. And that's the list. That's the list. We got through the list. So that's the list of performers that are getting inducted this year. Again, if we look at the real main creme de la creme list, it's Tina Turner, Carole King, the Go-Go's, Jay-Z, Foo Fighters, and Todd Rundgren. Have there been worse years for introductions? Yes. Have there been better years? Yes. This is just, I don't know, it's very middle of the road. You know, I think, again, the big one is Tina Turner and the Go-Go's. That's another big one. Jay-Z's an interesting one. We all knew Foo Fighters were going to be there, but you know, it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The big outrage this year, of course, is that Iron Maiden is not in there, which is kind of silly that it's just hitting this year because they could have been in for a while, but I think it is very important to have bands like that. Of course, the Hall likes to ignore metal, despite Randy Rhodes being on there, which is interesting. That's part of what's interesting about him being on the list, but you know, we could go all day about bands that deserve to be in there that will, you know, never be in there possibly. You have Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Thin Lizzy, the Runaways, the Misfits, Motorhead. I mean, the list goes on, and that's just talking about, you know, American bands. What about bands from other countries that maybe didn't have the impact here, but definitely had in their other countries? What about ex-Japan? What about Shonen Knife or something like that? You know, these kind of artists will never get in there, even though they deserve it. But this is a largely US ran institution, so that might be stretching it a little bit, but I don't know, maybe they should put Rock and Roll Hall of Fame of America on there because it just seems so odd to ignore every other country. You know, if a band had an impact over here, sure, they'll throw them in there, but it just seems odd that there could be a band for this huge Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that was only big in America, but they'll get inducted. But if they were only big in another country, it's just not gonna happen. So it really shouldn't be a surprise. But one that is to me a little bit is that Rage Against the Machine is still getting ignored. Now, sure, it's a little bit too aggressive, possibly a little bit too political for a band like that to be in there, but Tom Morello is one of those guys, kind of like Dave Grohl, that's just, you know, one of their guys. He's always there at every ceremony, and he's there. So how has his band not get inducted? I don't know, but I think they should be in there too, just like Iron Maiden. Those are two of the bands that really helped spawn entire genres, and the genre that Rage Against the Machine helped spawn, which was rap rock, of course, came from heavy metal and hip-hop in general, and heavy metal, of course, is rooted to Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, all these other bands. But again, now I'm repeating myself. So with all that being said, just to end this, because I'm tired of talking about this, what do you guys think of the list this year? Do you think there are some good artists in there? Would you have included some other artists like Iron Maiden? Let me know all of that and more in the comments below. And if you are new around here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and all those things that every other YouTuber ever has told you to do. Once again, my name is Kimchi Chris. This has been Rock Bliss with Kimchi Chris, and we will see you guys on the next episode.